absolutely. I think we just better get it rolling, don't you think? We have got a new intro, as you can probably tell.
Have we?
My name is Paul Harvey, and this is Sustainable Old Men. I'm so delighted to be with my friends, Gavin from Sustainability UK. What are you showing me,
I,
Gavin?
I'm a bit miffed actually with you, Paul, today because
Got it wrong.
I didn't get the memo about the black clothing uniform for the day.
It's Black Tuesday.
Black Tuesday.
No. It's the sodding cold in my office, and I'm wearing a very thick pullover.
Studying cold in my office Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay. Anyway, I'm Gavin London from Sustainology. I know a little bit about sustainability, but not as much as the expert himself.
Oh,
No.
Gav,
Howard
you do it so
Gunstock.
well.
Howard Gunstock, Barnet fan, entrepreneur, good-looking dude, and a heart of gold.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's lovely. I'm Howard Gunstock. Sorry, yes, I'll pay you later. I'm Howard Gunstock. I'm the CEO of a company called Carbon Capture, who we grow seaweed to help repopulate our oceans and atmospheres and increase marine biodiversity. Generally, do good to our planet. That's what we want to do. We want to help our planet.
And you are that close to putting some lines in the water, just that close.
Oh my God! Can we do lines in the water update? Like each time we do it, we can do an update. I tell you something, right? It's been so mad. We got an email from our line supplier saying that they had a couple of problems with getting the lines out, but it's amazing. They were talking to us about the fact that it actually probably won't make very much of a difference because the water temperatures that we've had this year, whereas it would get colder in November, sort of towards the beginning of November, actually won't be getting cold until the end of November. So that's the real time we're going to sort of see good growth of our good preparation for our saplings and stuff, so or spallings or whatever they want to be called. So that's really been quite a frustrating thing, but it will be happening. We've got the lines. They're about to come out of the traps in a few weeks, and they're all nice and propagated and then stuff. So that's getting really exciting. And I still can't tell you about the good news. God damn it! Stupid contract talk. God damn it!
But it's happening. That's the good news. That's our good news for this week. And it's close. It's close.
It's a cliffhanger to make viewers come back to the next episode.
Find out more. So look, our conversation this week is all going to be about how someone could get themselves into a sustainability job, a job that makes a difference, that is not contributing less to the disaster that everything else seems to contribute to.
Excellent.
I mean, it is. When you look out in the world, a lot of the younger people really want to get into sustainability. And from what I've heard in some of the stats I've seen, a lot of the larger companies, traditional companies, are struggling to fill positions or get young people to take positions in what is seen as earth-burning organizations. It's like, people don't want to be in them. But if you are already working in an established career, what's the opportunity for moving? And where is the big places to move? Where can you go?
What was that question?
Sorry, I can extemporize some more if you like. I mean,
no, because there's a couple of points to this story, right? First off, this is about getting into green jobs, and most of the people that are going to be looking at this on our podcast come from a lot of our viewership from LinkedIn, which is less to do with manual labour and more to do with sort of middle level management type activities, business processes, etc. So let's be clear, right? Some of the ideas when you're talking about manual labour aren't necessarily traditionally associated with green jobs, but the skills are directly transferable. Whereas what you've got when you're talking about someone transitioning from back office staff into doing something else is finding something appropriate for their skill set, which more than likely is possible but it's more to do with their confidence ability and being able to explain that that gap in a way that that person feels that they're able to talk about their experiences into that role. Whereas someone who, for example, goes on a roof would be exactly the same, whether it's thatching effectively or putting up solar panels. The only difference is adding on the bit of electrical engineering, etc., that is required to understand what's going on. So a lot of this thing is to do with perspective. A lot of this is to do with perspective, and a lot of this is to do with how the organisation actually, how the individual actually receives things.
Mm.
I think there's also a point to be made here about we're talking about green jobs, and in that we should mention people leaving jobs specifically because it's called climate quitting, where they don't agree with the values of the company. But coming back to your point about large companies that are burning the earth are struggling to recruit, that they tend to be losing sustainability staff. I still struggle with the idea that BP, Shell have a sustainability officer. So it depends on how much you are value driven, and the younger generations tend to be a lot more value driven than the older ones.
Okay.
There was a guy I spoke to on LinkedIn, and he mentioned on LinkedIn about how he left the oil industry, and he was taken on by, I think it was Shell, to work in their solar division. I think it was. I'm not sure what he was doing in that solar division. He was quite a well-paid individual, but he just couldn't take the bullshit, basically, because the public face was saying one thing and the actual behind the scenes was doing something completely different. And it's like, and he was surrounded by people that didn't believe in climate change. So it was the weirdest place to be. He had to leave, just so incongruent to his experience of what he went in there for.
Go on, Howard.
So, shall we go back on to how to get into green jobs and sustainability?
Well, that might be a good plan.
That might be a good
Thank you for holding us
start.
to task, Howard.
Well, I feel like one of us had to.
Yeah, I know.
Black jumper.
I know.
So let's just shall we start off this conversation? Let's start off this conversation. What do we think let's just start off in the main in an easier way. What do we think the main drivers are for people wanting to get into green jobs?
Well, my sense of it is they want to make a contribution. They're seeing all this stuff happening around them, and they want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
And some of that is down. And Gav, what do you think some of the solution to that would be? Like, genuinely, like, what if someone was to be part of the solution? What sort of things can they do?
And if it's a value-driven decision, so Paul's just talked about the chap who's gone from the oil industry back into Shell, didn't like what he saw. People that have strong values like that want to make a difference, as Paul says, then they just need to take a step back and say, how can I make a difference? And a difference to what? Is it a difference to climate? Is it a difference to social inequity? Is it a difference to biodiversity? So as soon as you start analysing what you want to make a difference for, different jobs come to the fore.
Brilliant. Okay, so you've got opportunity.
Yes.
Thanks. The other thing you've got is education.
Yes.
So how do I get the right amount of knowledge and information to make sure I'm making the right decision and going into the right area? How do I make sure that I'm doing that I find something that's appropriate for me to do? And how do I do something that I can? And how can I sort of ensure that this is something that I stay in? Because quite a lot of people try to transition into new jobs all the time. And quite a lot of the time they can either make a start or they run out of steam. So there's I think there's three aspects to it. How do I get myself into the position where I know what I want to do? How do I educate myself, and then how do I make sure that I stay the course? So if we talk about education first, really. If I wanted to go educate myself, what's the sort of things that on sustainability that you think you would go to, would need?
Am I going to go next?
You're going to have to, because I don't have any sense of this. I mean, my interest has always been energy, so that's what I've always explored energy, and I know a lot about it. So that's where my skill base is.
Okay.
There is no standard recognized sustainability qualification statement. There is a number of routes you can go down. So we talked about opportunity. So let's say, for sake of argument, opportunity, and you want to make a difference in terms of the biodiversity crisis. Then you're looking more towards ecological type solutions and qualifications. And one that I would thoroughly recommend is IEMA, which is, so you're nodding, hooray. Good, because I can't remember what it stands for. Institute for Environmental Management A, whatever A is. Can you remember?
No.
We'll look it up. We'll look it up.
Okay. So the IEMA is one. If you want to go more broadly and have a background in business already, Cambridge University or Cambridge Institute of Sustainability, or CISL, depending on how you want to pronounce it, runs two qualifications. One's a general business one and one's a marketing one. I find the marketing one interesting because, well, if you think about, we did a podcast not a million years ago about the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals is responsible consumption and production. Marketing encourages you to consume
more.
Exactly. Sorry, more. Good point. More. So sustainable marketing is not necessarily a contradiction in terms, because I do have two colleagues that have done that course, and they believe that sustainable marketing has to be the way to go. But it's similar to degrowth, which definitely needs to be rebranded. So that's a topic for another day. So that's another route of qualification. The qualifications I actually did personally were reporting orientated. So I'm qualified as a global reporting initiative. So that's basically how a company reports and what things it should cover. So that covers biodiversity, pollution, waste, water management, governance, diversity and inclusion, etc., etc. So mine's a generic one, but it's more orientated to reporting. But it doesn't take a genius to actually say, or a client to say, what do I have to do? Then I have to come out with solutions, because otherwise, what is my purpose? So there's a few. What did you take any qualifications to set up carbon capture?
I did not, but I did do a load of stuff and reading and resources, etc. So I was going to start off with the sort of the process that I took to understand what was going on in the climate space. So first off, I don't, like many people actually, I was actually quite anxious about the change. But coming from a learning and development space, what I thought was the smartest way to do it was to give myself a broad sort of education. One of the things that really was huge for me was finding podcasts that were really good to listen to, like this one, but rather than randomly, a bit more concise with some of their information. The ones that really started to help me understand stuff and when I say stuff, some of the challenges, etc., that were really difficult. The basic things that I was looking at to give me stats and figures from real scientists and insights was something called what's it called? A BBC podcast. It's called Crowd Science. So they do a lot of stuff on climate change and carbon, etc. Then I got into a podcast called How to Save a Planet, and then there's another one that I also call my climate journey. And then once I got an understanding of the sorts of issues that were interesting, it was much easier for me to hone in what I was trying to do. What was really key was I was aware of what my skill sets were, and that's a really big, a big important thing. I was aware that I had a big mouth. I was good at communicating. I was good at explaining ambiguity in clear, concise terms, and I was reasonably relatable. So those skills were really useful to help me understand the sorts of roles I wanted to do. What really was fascinating was that I realized that my ADHD made me absolutely obsessed with certain things, and seaweed was the thing that I became obsessed with. I read hundreds and hundreds of papers on seaweed as a solution, and then I used my ideas as my thinking as an entrepreneur to be able to use some of that knowledge and some of that insight and some of that idea into turning carbon capture. What was really formative was the learning that I undertook as well. So there's a lot of really good work on a website called Climate Change Academy. So there's self-guided climate courses, not for non-technical people. There's a lot of good resources on Project Drawdown. The United Nations do a fantastic set of courses as well that are totally free. And I believe there's some courses that are running at some universities that are online resources. So
yes, can I just jump in on that and build on it? One of the great resources that's online is Coursera. So it's Coursera. And just picking up on your point about some universities, Coursera has lots and lots of university courses, a lot of which are absolutely free, and you can pay a marginal amount of money to get a certification, which you can then add to your LinkedIn profile. So I would thoroughly recommend that. Sorry, Howard, for jumping in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So once I had the education, I was then actually going on to the next thing that was the challenge is how do I position myself? Because I'm not a subject matter expert. What I am is someone with some knowledge and some way of doing things. And the next barrier that I had was actually how do I market myself on social media platforms like I know what I'm talking about within a certain area. So yes, getting your qualifications, brilliant. Getting certificates to put on LinkedIn, brilliant. Getting people to talk about what you've done, really good, and your skill set. And then it's actually being able to articulate what you want to do in a few words and lines. And what was really interesting is the little bio section in your LinkedIn profile. If you can explain who you are, what you do, what value you can add in that section, so that's like 250 characters or even less actually, then you know exactly the sort of jobs that you want to be applying for because it will fit into that criteria. So I would spend a bit of time after getting a broad selection of educational pieces and things to do into actually articulating who you are as a professional. Clearly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on your CV, but quite a lot of the time, that would be kind of secondary to actually being able to know what you need to do. So the next challenge that I've got is how do I actually get into sustainability and talk to people to understand what's going on. So the next resource I would strongly recommend is something called opendoorclimate.com. Have you heard of Open Door Climate?
No.
Amazing. Right. So Open Door Climate is a resource tool to help you open the door into getting a degree in sustainability and climate change. So you can either register as a career seeker, or you could talk to climate professionals to get insights and understanding on what they do to better understand your chances and what you need to do. It's a Google Docs form, etc. It's got a community of thousands of people. It's excellent. And I found this actually quite late in the day, not during my career transition, but from a guy named Daniel Hill, who has started this open door climate community, and it's a really cool resource. You can follow the hashtag on LinkedIn. I don't suggest you do, but it's a really great little tool. So if you're wanting to speak to someone, whether it's in law, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in climate solutions, agriculture, aquaculture, whatever it is, you can find that subsection that you're looking for. People will will identify themselves and raise their hand, and you can start there. This website maybe is maybe a little bit American focused, but it definitely does have a lot of really good resources and tools on it.
That does raise an interesting point, because you mentioned lawyers and other aspects. It's like there are ways and means of doing your existing job within a green infrastructure or a green environment in that respect, because there must be a lot of work now turning up for lawyers and for people who are an understanding of the law in the various challenges that are starting to happen. Now, I guess a lot of these are very underfunded, but there is possibility here.
There's one of the talking about underfunding and lawyers. If you're very keen,
those are two words that don't go together very often.
Well, yes.
So the Good Law Project, which takes governments to court,
yeah.
you know, they're not funded. I don't think. I think they actually do fund it, but it's a very low level.
They're supported by charities, but literally, who I was going to talk about is the Good Law Project. They've taken the government to court on the net zero targets for the third time now, I think. So there are routes into green jobs using existing professions. So, as Paul said, any business, any green business will require traditional functions: HR, accounting, law, etc., etc. But I think what we should focus on is what Howard's touched on, which is those people who, to use a phrase, want to get their hands dirty doing green jobs. Again, I mean, you can simply volunteering for a wildlife trust, cleaning canals, rewilding, stuff like that.
There's been a massive project over the West Coast in the last few weeks, with a lot of people around here being involved in, which is rebuilding a native forest. They've been collecting hundreds of acorns, and they're growing acorn oak trees, and they're doing all sorts like that.
That project's really interesting, because if it's on the West Coast, it's the one that Aviva is supporting, and they chucked £1 million at it. So there is money in that project. Large companies, particularly insurers, who are streets ahead of anyone else, recognizing potential threats. It is their job, after all, to evaluate risks, etc. Where they're looking is where there's, to come back to what Howard's saying, where there's opportunities.
So there's opportunities to work, opportunities to educate, opportunities to volunteer. If we talk about the opportunities to volunteer, because sometimes it's not just the transition to a green job, it's the transition to a green mindset to be able to sustain said green job. So what other things are, I mean, we've talked about quite a lot to do with the environment, right? But what sort of things can people do to look at the rest of the ESG policy, the social and the governance side of things, to make fairness? What other things can people do?
So you're touching on two aspects. We talked about the environment per se. Now we can talk about a little bit about diversity and inclusion. That is a specialist area, which is, I must confess, is not my specialist area. But what it's about, because it's a very intriguing moment in time. We've been increasingly more liberal over the last 20 years, and suddenly the current government is trying to reverse that trend. So it's so what I'm considering in terms of diversity inclusion is including people based on gender, inclusion based on race, that kind of thing. And how to get into it, there's growing movements at ground level, just to get more women involved for sake of argument. So you've seen the women only network groups, that kind of thing. And there's others based on ethnic groupings and gender.
This is about being a good human generally, isn't it, really? It's not necessarily about a green job as such. This is about rebuilding community and it's one thing I'm a great deal. I think community is the answer, really. Actually, communities, strong communities, is the answer to climate resilience.
Yeah, go on. That's true. Let's talk about what you do.
Well, I'm involved. I live near the Findhorn Foundation, so there's a lot of community around here, and there's a lot of people involved in various projects. They've been doing this for 30 years. Some of these guys here were some of the original warriors that were going into to fields and pulling up GM crops. So I'm involved in climate with the Transition Town in Forest here. So that's an organisation. But again, it's a community organisation, and what it does, it grows food on their own land, and they provide food for the community larder. So they actually deliver free food into the community larder from this organisation. I guess what else am I involved in? I'm involved in the foundation on the periphery, doing maintenance work and that sort of stuff, supporting some of their maintenance issues. But that's it's actually just doing physical work to keep the system running. That's what it is.
So that's a really interesting point. So doing integral work to keep the system running. That's something that's not specialized to you, because actually all around the country there are food banks and charities, etc. That is about being a good human. And I guess what I was sort of leaning towards as part of this conversation in this ESG piece is actually doing things to help others is really what getting into ESG, sustainability, etc. is really all about. And I think as a people for too long, we have been focused really on the self, and there's I guess an awakening or an understanding about how we are as people that says we can be better. I don't obviously get into anything that's a political hot potato at the moment.
Can I put something into this? Just quickly, just ask the question and see if you can relate to this. So I think I am the oldest one here, and I remember working as a Saturday lad in a company when I was like 16, 17, and the company was a largish retailer, but they were beautiful to their staff. They really treated their staff well. There was more staff than needed in that organisation, that's for sure. And it was a family. It was definitely a family. I think it actually belonged to the co-op, actually, the organisation. What I noticed when I went into business back into the 80s is the shift between the move into the idea of profit maximisation. And I think when we went to profit maximisation, the people became a resource rather than equity. They weren't that important anymore. And I think that's the shift that we've gone through.
That I think you can associate that with and Howard, jump in if you disagree. There's been phases of management theory, and one management theory is based on Taylor, and the Taylor's view is people just work for money, they don't care about anything else. So if you try to apply a Taylorian view now, when people are more purpose driven, and just say, I'll give you 30 grand extra, a lot of people will just turn around and say, no, not interested. I don't like what you're doing. So Taylorian theories kind of died out a little bit. I kind of grew up in the Thatcher years of the 80s.
Them down in the West Coast.
I was working in a coal mine. No. And the sort of the progression of management moved over to, I remember the company I was working for introduced something called total quality management.
I remember those.
When the employees had to come forward, well, didn't have to, were motivated to come forward with ideas, because as most consultants will tell you, most of the best ideas to solve a company's problems come from within the company. They don't come from the consultants themselves. I've made a pretty big fortune on that. No, I'm joking. I haven't made a fortune. So I just want to come back to something that Howard said about people thinking about themselves and now moving to a different world. You're talking about community earlier. How well do you know The Prisoner's Dilemma?
The what, sorry?
The Prisoner's Dilemma. I thought this is where you would go, oh my God, I know that.
Is that the one with the lever?
I haven't heard it in the context.
That's the railway thing, but this is, the Prisoner's Dilemma is something different. I remember the name of it, but I can't remember the context.
Yeah, me too. Go for it, yeah.
It's one where basically, I'll have to paraphrase it, but if prisoner A says, oh, it was prisoner B's fault, prisoner A gets out. But if prisoner B says it's prisoner A's fault, prisoner B gets out. But if they both blame each other, they're in deep shit. And if they don't blame each other, they kind of get a lesser punishment. So logically, if you're very, very selfish, you blame the other person. But if everyone blames everyone else, everyone suffers. So the whole prisoner dilemma type thing is, if you work together, you get a better solution.
Okay.
I've silenced you. Brilliant. Awesome.
Yeah. There's a hideous TV game where there's money involved and two people have to negotiate.
Yeah, I thought about that.
It's a hideous game, and the idea is, if you trust each other, one has to take the money, and you have to trust that they'll give it. But if the other one doesn't take the trust, then they win, and they get it.
There's a brilliant like little clip where this guy has got this very innocent looking girl who looks really, really frightened. They've got like 120 grand on the line or something. And he's saying, look, I won't lie to you. We'll both come out of there with 60 grand each. All you have to do is just say that we'll share or steal. And he's like, I'm going to share. And he's convinced that he's going to share. And she picks up the steal button and she's like, steals the money. And the whole audience is like, ah, gasp moment, horror moment. Also.
Yeah, because it's one of those things, like if it is in public like that, and an audience sees someone not doing the right thing, that person will get lambasted for at least a week or two on their 15 seconds of fame.
Oh, and the rest. Yeah.
I was being generous.
How does that sort of circle back into our chat on climate change?
No, I'm curious myself how we're going to get it back to where we were going with this.
It's about purpose. It's about purpose. If you want, people now are more interested in doing something to make a difference. Money is not the same motivator as it was 20 years ago. I appreciate that I have friends of a similar age as myself that are still money motivated, but
well, bear in mind, as a podcast host, I've interviewed 500 people, and most of those, there are a few of them that totally are focused on money, but the majority of them have all said they've had the money and it was awful. Or, they enjoyed it, yes, but they weren't happy. They had, they could do anything they wanted, but at the same token, life was hollow.
I'll let you know what it's like in 24 months.
No, there's no doubt about it. No, that's a good point. Let's get on to money. Is there money in green jobs? It's a good question. It's a good segue.
So
can we change that? Can we change that? What is the reward from a green job?
Well, we live in a world that you do require money. So are you gonna get, is that like for like in a positional green job, similar position in a burn the earth down job?
I'd say no.
No, I say no as well. Probably.
Simply because the economics, burn the earth down job has to pay more to get someone to do the job.
Yeah.
That's pure economic sense.
Mm.
If people are motivated by purpose, quite often employers who might not be on the same scale in terms of virtues might just say, do this job and I'll pay you 25. I know you're on 30 already, but this does save the planet.
So what does someone in ESG, who is someone in a largish company who is basically responsible for the ESG thing, what are they getting paid?
I was going to come back to that. I've written it down. When Howard said ESG about lots and lots of good causes, that is true when ESG began. ESG nowadays is quite often a tick box exercise. And as a consequence, to me and viewers, you might not agree with me, it's lost its purpose or it's been diluted slightly. But to answer your question, what does someone get paid to do ESG? Because it's become now sort of a reporting requirement, it's up there with any financial accountant. It's paid well.
I'm told I read there's a massive shortage. There's going to be it's going to be a very sought after job over the next like 20 years or so.
Yeah. If you think that I can't remember which one of the big four accounting companies said this, but it's one of the ones that is scaling up massively in terms of recruiting sustainability driven people. They believe that sustainability consultancy will earn more than audit and tax within 4 years. That is
definitely good. There's definitely good industry to move into. I'm a little bit aware of time, gentlemen.
Yeah, I am too.
So just to sort of summarize some of the points. If you want to go to do something meaningful, see what voluntary pieces you can do. I know that's something that people have always had the opportunity of doing, but actually now's more the time. If you have time, especially with families, etc., you want to do something community-based, I'd implore you to do that. Spend a bit of time understanding what it is that interests you as far as the aspect of sustainability. Learn your skill. Make sure that you can show that you have development and knowledge. So educate yourself. I definitely listen to podcasts. Definitely get some qualifications under your belt. Promote that on LinkedIn. Look at things like Open Door if you want to have a conversation with business professionals. Find out what other ways that you can engage, and then understand that actually, if you've got purpose, that you can actually make an impact and can actually make a difference. If you're interested in sustainability or any other questions, I'm sure if anyone was listening to the podcast wanted to have a chat with us, I'd have an open door to have a conversation. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we all would.
So please feel free to reach out. We're always delighted to have a conversation with you guys. And thank you very much for listening.
Wonderful. Thanks, Howard.